welcome. The sample I'm going to give today is related to the first and second lecture. So as a start, we are going to talk about power, and we start with a definition of what the term power is. Now, power is the ability of its holders to force compliance or obedience of other people to their will. Now, if you have certain power, you can comply others, you can force others to comply with your regulation, with the law, with any other type of command that you want. The example I have here is a police officer who can use power or force power and make other people comply with the law, comply with his or her command. So a police officer can force power to force some criminals, force some thieves, or stop them from doing certain actions. So the term power is the ability of its holders, of its owners, people who have this power, to force compliance and obedience of other people to their will, to their command. Now, how can language impose power? What is the relation of language and power? How can I impose power by using language? Some of the statistics which were published on 2000 in September shows that there is a very great relation between language and power. I'm going to read those statistics and see how they were analyzed in relation to power and language. Number one, the number of pages on the World Wide Web was 320 million, and the percentage of all websites in English was 80%. Now, what does this statistic mean? How can we interpret them in terms of power? Number one, the number of pages on the World Wide Web is a very large number, and it is in English. All those web pages are written in one language, which is English. Now, this means that the English language has the power to dominate the web, to dominate the word, that if you need certain information, you cannot access it unless you have the power of speaking language. So knowing a language is power. So language has become so widespread to the extent that if you do not know English, you cannot know certain information. You are excluded actually from knowing some information that you might need at any time. The other statistics which says that the percentage of all websites in English are 80%. Imagine this number, this percentage, that the English language dominates the World Wide Web to the extent that if anybody doesn't speak the language, he is unable to access the web. He will not be able to make use of the information found on the web. So if you do not speak a certain language, you are excluded from some kind of power. So not knowing a language, it means that you have lost some power. You do not have this power. So this shows how important knowing language is. This shows what is the relation of language and power. Another example explaining how language can explain power is the following. Now, the point we want to make is that the language that you speak can be a pathway to power, can give you certain amount of power. So knowing a language is power. Now, if you look at this image, if somebody knows a language that you do not know, you will be confused. You will be unable to answer or even respond or understand what he is saying. A person, for example, as we see in this example, a person who speaks French, when he or she greets you saying bonjour, and you do not know what does the word bonjour is, because you do not know French, you do not know any other English, you do not know any French, you do not have the power of knowing French. So you will be confused, you feel you are ignorant, you feel you are embarrassed actually. So power has, language, knowing a language has the power of making people feel more comfortable, giving the people the power to make others feel ignorant, feel confused, and feel unable to understand a language. So people who have the knowledge or the language or any skill have the power to make you feel ignorant or confused because they have knowledge that you do not have. An example or a similar example that can help us understand this is when we have a computer expert and an average person who does not know a lot about computer programming or about computer skills. So the computer expert has the power to make the other person feel ignorant, to make him feel confused. He can talk in a way that the other person cannot understand. He can use terminology that the other person or the average person will find difficult to understand. So knowing a language, knowing specific language is getting more power. So language means power. There is a close relation between language and power. Now we move to one of the most famous theories of language. This is called the de Saussure's theory of language. And first of all, I would like to introduce this Swiss linguist. His name is Ferdinand de Saussure. He was born in 1857 and died 1913. He's, as I said, a Swiss linguist whose ideas laid the foundation for many significant developments in the field of linguistics. Now, what we are interested in is the theory about language which Ferdinand de Saussure has raised, and the title of his theory is Language as a Representational System. I'm going to talk about this theory and study or analyze some of the main principles this theory talks about. Now, according to de Saussure, as soon as you hear or read a word, you know what concept it refers to. Now, for example, if I say a word like tree or watch, the moment you hear this word, a concept created in your mind telling you that this term tree, corresponds to this concept. So once you have heard or once you have read this word, your mind creates an image which help you know what does these sounds, the tree means, what does the word clock or watch mean. So our mind make this correspondence and match the image with the sound that you hear through your senses or ears or articulate your apparatus of hearing. So the idea is as soon as we hear a word, as soon as we hear any lexical item, our mind match the sound of this word with an image or with a concept which is already in our mind. Then the understanding or the knowledge of what this label means, what these sounds means, become available. Then we move to de Saussure's division of language. De Saussure talks about two main division of language. He divides language into two main parts. The first one called the langue, and the other is the parole. And the difference between them is very easy to understand. Now I'm read the definition of langue. It is our innate knowledge. So this knowledge is not acquired. It is innate. We already have it when we were born. It is the innate knowledge of the systematic correspondence. So the correspondence is regular, it is systematic, it is not arbitrary. Between what? Between the sound that we hear or between the words that we read and meaning and the concept that are created in our mind. These will make up language, including knowledge of what utterances are possible and what utterances are not. So the word langue means our competence, our ability to create the concept that correspond with the words that we know, the words that we hear, the words that we read. This competence include our ability to judge grammatical sentences from ungrammatical sentences. Now, if we have this example, see tomorrow I will, of course, our competence, our langue will tell us this is not a grammatical sentence. We can judge immediately that this is not acceptable, this is a not well-formed sentence, there is a problem with the structure of this sentence. Why we could say this? Because we have already the knowledge, we have an innate knowledge that tells us that this is not accepted, this is ungrammatical, it does not comply with the rule of grammar and syntax. So what's the correct version of this sentence? I will see you tomorrow. So there should be specific word order that we need to follow so that our sentence becomes grammatical. So the word long refers to our competence, refers to our knowledge of the language, all those grammatical rules, all those intuitions and chunks of speech that we already have in our mind and we use when we judge any sentence, whether it is grammatical or not. So this ability or this competence will help us judge sentences through our intuition, through our knowledge of grammatical rules, that this sentence applies to the rules of a grammar or does not apply to the rules of a grammar. The parole is the actual use of language, our production of language, our application of the competence, our actual use of what we have in the long or our innate knowledge of the language. So if you look at these images, the long is something innate, something in our mind, in our brains if you like, but the parole is what we produce. It is the actual use of the long. It's the actual use of our competence. This reminds us of the difference between competence and performance of the language, that the competence is our knowledge of language, and performance our actual use of language. Now in the first image, which shows that in the mind, in our brain, we have all those knowledge, or we have innate knowledge of language, which is innate, we have it when we were born, but the parole or the performance of the language is the application of the long, it is the performance of the language, it is the use of those grammatical rules, this innate knowledge, and apply them in using language. So the main idea is that according to this Saussure, language can be divided into two parts, competence and performance, or as the terms in French are, langue and parole. Langue and parole. Another principle of de Saussure's theory is the idea of sign, signifier, and signified. According to de Saussure, when you hear a word, when you hear any term, and we again use the example of a tree, if somebody say tree, this sound that you hear is called the signifier because it signifies something, it refers to something. So once you hear this sound or this collection of sounds or these units of sound, let's call them these morphemes, which are joined together in a way or another. So the word tree is the signifier, which refers to the sound sequence which makes up a label or a word. We call it the signifier. This signifier, this label, corresponds with something that it signifies. It has a something signified. So the word tree signifies with the concept of tree. So once you hear the word tree, your mind would match it with a concept of tree, then this correspondence, which is called sign, makes you understand what does the word tree mean, what does it correspond to, what concept it matches. So the signifier is the sound sequence which makes up a label, or which makes up a lexical item, or which makes up a word. And the signified is the meaning or concept associated with the signified. And the whole process that our mind does, called the sign, matching the signifier with the signified, is called sign, as this image I have here shows. So the sign is the correspondence between signifier and signified. It is the association that binds the signifier and signified together. Another principle of de Saussure's theory is that the link between the signified and the signifier is arbitrary. it is not regular, it is not systematic. If you have a signified item, it is not necessary that the signifier is always the same. In other words, we can have one signified which correspond to different signifiers. The signifiers are arbitrary. They do not follow any rule. They should not, in a way or another, be similar to the signified. So the idea is, if you have a signified, or the signified concept does not really correspond to the signifier. Now, the signified car, for example, considering this example in different languages, shows that there is no similarity. If the signifier is the same, I would have the word car in all the world's language. So the signifier car in English is car, in French it's voiture, in Arabic, as you know, sayara, Spanish, German. So this shows that the signifier is arbitrary. It does not correspond with the signified. They have an arbitrary relationship. It is not necessary that the signifier and the signified match. They do not have any relation, any systematic way of correspondence or association. Now, according to de Saussure's theory of language, signs partially derive meaning from their relationship with other associated signs. Now, the process which we call that the mind does, which is the association between the signifier and the signified, is called sign. Now, according to this theory, signs are understood through association, by associating them with other similar signs. Now, if you look at these images, I have two images. The first one shows a bus which is overcrowded and another which is crowded. I mean, the number of people boarding the bus are a great number. So according to de Saussure, we can understand one sign by associating it with another. For example, looking at the first image where we have a bus with little number of boarding people, it is a crowded bus, but it is not overcrowded. How could I understand the word overcrowded? I could understand the word overcrowded because my mind would associate the word crowded with overcrowded. So this similarity between crowded and overcrowded is going to make understanding of the word, matching of the word easier, will create concept easily because of the association between the two words, crowded, overcrowded. The other example I have in here, which refers to another principle of de Saussure's theory, is that signs do not exist in isolation, but in systems of associative relationship. So if you have a sign, in our mind, it is not isolated. It is not detached. It is in a relation, in associative relation with another sign. For example, if I have this image, and I would tell you, look at the white tulip. Look at the white tulip. Now, you would understand the white tulip when you associate it with the red tulip, because you cannot understand this color without being different from a different color, from another color. So, because there is this relationship, white, red, white, black, our mind can understand or can match or can associate the label, the sequence of sound with the concept created in the mind. So the idea is we know the meaning of white tulip through the association with red tulip. So the idea is that signs in our brain do not exist in isolation. They are associated with another similar signs, and through this association, understanding or creation of the concept in our mind happens easily and quickly. This is the end of lecture 2, and this is the end of de Saussure's theory. We have only considered some of the main principles. Now, before we finish, I have some sample exam questions related to the first and second lecture. We are going to read them together, and they are just samples. They are not the ones that will come in the exam. This is just to show you how this course can come in the exam, how certain ideas can be made into questions, and mainly multiple choice questions. From lecture 1, I have chosen some of the questions, if you can read them. We have is the study of how a listener recognizes words and utterances. Now, which definition matches with this explanation? Of course, I have already marked the correct answers. Psycholinguistics, sorry. Psycholinguistics is the study of how a listener recognizes words and utterances. Now, the same question can come the other way around. In the first case, I have given the explanation, and I expect you to recognize which is the right term matching with this explanation. The same question can come the other way around, where we have the term, and you need to supply or choose the correct explanation. Psycholinguistics is the study of, and then you have the explanation. Number 3 refers to grammatical rules which determine how words can be combined into phrases and sentences, and I have 4 choices: morpheme, philosophy, or syntax or morphology. So syntax refers to the grammatical rules which determine how words can be combined into phrases and sentences. Another group of questions the is used to keep communication lines open and also keep social relationships well. What is it? Aesthetic function of language, referential function of language, or affective function of language? Of course, the answer is phatic language is used to keep communication lines open and keep the social relationship well. Question number 2, there is more than one of English. Example, Indian English, American English. So there is more than one variety of English. Example, Indian, American English. Number 3, aesthetic language is usually used in mathematics, physics, poetry, or morphology. And the answer is number C. Aesthetic language is usually used in poetry, not in science, of course. Choose the example that expresses affective use of language. It is very hot today. Wow, she is very beautiful. Go to the end of the road, put those books on the table. So you need to decide which of these examples shows that it is used affectively. Of course, example number 2, number P. Wow, she is very beautiful. Why? Because it expresses feelings. It shows that the person is excited. He's telling us his attitude. So affective language is a language where we can use to show our feelings, to show our attitude about something or somebody. Now, some of the sample exam question which I have chosen from this lecture, lecture 2. Number 1, Ferdinand de Saussure was a Syrian or Swiss, British, or American linguist. Now, the answer is P. De Saussure divided language into 2 parts, langue and parole. Number C. And finally, is the actual use of language in both speech and writing, what is it? Linguistics, language, competence, or parole? The actual use is parole, of course. Number D, the link between the signifier and the signified is regular, systematic, arbitrary, or logical. Of course, it is arbitrary, as we have just discussed. Is the ability of its holders to force compliance or obedience of other people to their will. This refers to power. Number C. And that's the end of our second lecture. Thank you very much for listening.